Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Chad here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, we've got another gun gripe episode for you. There's been a lot of things going on, and sometimes it's too much to cover, but we're going to do our best to kind of dive into the stuff that's going on with Q as well as SB Tactical. You guys know that the Battle of the Braces is very much underway, and there's definitely some things we want to cover in this particular video, and we're going to get on that for sure. I'd like to take a moment to thank our friends at the USCCA. They are a great group of people. They provide essentially what is a carry insurance, and they've also got a nationwide group of attorneys that will come to your aid if you're involved in a self-defense shooting, a justified shooting. So the best way to think about them is a carry advocacy group, a carry training group, to make sure that you've got all the right information you need to make sure you're carrying legal in whatever state you're in, jurisdiction you're in, keeping you legal. And then if you are involved in a shooting, a personal defense situation, their lawyers are there to make sure that you have the resources you need to come out on top there. So check them out. The link in the description box below, usccapartners.com/IV8888, and support them. We definitely appreciate that. Okay, so getting into this a bit, you guys know that the ATF sent a letter to Q about the honey badger, and basically saying, you can't sell this because it's an illegal SBR, whatever their reasoning would be, right? Well, Q's lawyers sent a letter back to the ATF, and then the ATF basically allowed a 60-day stay on the decision so that they could continue selling the honey badger and other guns within their inventory that use braces and things like that. But basically, the conjecture that's in place here is that we've got a situation where the ATF has pointed directly to a specific product from a specific manufacturer with a brace as being a problem in terms of NFA legality. And that becomes a big issue. So like right now, we check Q's website, honey badgers are not available. They show nothing in stock. Now, I don't know if that means that's because the stay is up. But anyone can guess what's going to happen with this moving forward. You guys might recall some of the information that was put out about SB Tactical and people talking about, oh, well, only a certain amount of braces within their group, were actually ATF approved and all of this stuff. So there's a lot of things going on that definitely point to some really scary potential things happening with braces, especially under a potential Biden-Harris administration.
Slightly. As far as I know, the issue with the ATF was just towards the honey badger pistol itself and that particular style of brace. I don't think it really involved anything else. But I was wondering if the 60-day stay was calendar days or working days. I don't know. I mean, it just depends on how many days the government works. I guess we might still have a few weeks to go, but I think it's calendar days. But that would have been up on December the 8th, I believe, and today is December the 9th. And it's a scary situation when a bureaucratic agency can just arbitrarily go after products that are on the market and just say, hey, what once was okay is no longer good for you. So we're just going to issue this letter, this opinion letter from the Firearms Technology Branch or whatever, and say, we changed our mind on this, and we think that now that particular item is an NFA item and is subject to the $200 registration tax. And if it's in your possession currently, you are now a felon.
Well, there's a couple of things to consider too.
Like, dude, come on.
The ATF has a few rogue agents that are really pushing this mostly.
Yeah.
From everybody that I've talked to in the industry, it is not a widely accepted view amongst the entire ATF that this should be the case. It's a couple of people that are, stirring up a ruckus, and those two people have met with Biden already and Harris. And Biden has already laid out, it's...
Regina Lombardo and Marvin Richardson,
yes.
Acting Director and Associate Deputy Director.
This was back on November 10th. They met with the Biden the faux Biden administration. But anyway, they've met with the Bidens already, and to kind of lay out, what exactly a Biden administration would want to accomplish in terms of what they want to do under the ATF. And they've already made it clear that they want to go after braces, and they've made it clear that they want to go after 80% lowers and frames and things of that nature. Ghost guns, that the anti-gunners call them ghost guns, but it's not illegal to make your own firearm.
No, absolutely not.
It is totally not a big deal to do it, and they want to essentially make you defenseless in that situation. So they've already laid out their plans at what they intend to do and what they want to, push the ATF to do.
Yep.
But it's a little bit more weird than that, because so that letter, that internal letter that was sent to, I guess it was a DA, a prosecutor, right?
Yeah, this was Wiley Law. This was about the imports. Remember this? This is kind of in the same vein what we were discussing.
It is in the same vein. And we will talk about this briefly, but I want to talk about the stuff with SB real quick first.
That's right. Yeah.
So the letter that was sent out, that was syndicated out on Ammo Land and everything, it was an internal letter that was circulated from the ATF to like a prosecutor. So what will happen is if a prosecutor in a criminal case comes up with a piece of technology, let's say that whatever case may be. Let's say that someone was arrested in connection with a crime, and then the prosecutor wants to bring up charges against them, and they want to take something to court, and let's say they want to slap them with some weapons charge, right? Well, in order to properly assess what the criminal in question was using or whatever, they have to submit like photos and evidence to the ATF, and the ATF will give, from the technology branch, will send out a letter saying, all right, it's this, it's that, whatever it may be, right? So this internal letter is not even intended for public consumption, right? Specifically mentions SB Tactical as knowingly and ongoingly, if that's even a word, selling their braces even though they were not like ATF approved, or falsely marketing their braces as ATF approved when they were not. Well, you remember that the ATF quit issuing opinion letters.
Yeah.
So that becomes part of the issue. So the problem is that a brace is not a firearm. Okay, so it gets a little bit slippery there, right? All these OEM manufacturers are buying these SB Tactical braces, and they're putting them on guns, and they're selling them to the public. And we're not talking just one or two manufacturers. We're talking literally all the manufacturers, right? I can't think of a single gun manufacturer that doesn't have a braced version of their gun somewhere in their catalog or have sold them in some capacity, right? You can't think of a single company, I can't, that you can't see that, right, as being the case, okay? So the problem is the ATF, just like, and this circles back to Q, all right, the ATF sent this letter to Q about the honey badger, all right? Well, that specifically outlines one particular SKU, right? If the ATF were to go after anybody, they would have to go after every single manufacturer, and every single SKU in their inventory would have to be named in that letter for that to even have half a bit of clout, right, to hold even the slightest candle. So the problem is, and it's not a problem, it's actually a good thing, is that because braces are so out there and they're so prevalent in the market, we're not talking bump stocks where, there might have been 150,000 or 100,000 bump stocks out there when Trump signed an executive order to ban them or whatever, or to force the ATF to view them in a negative light and prosecute people for possessing them. Braces are different because there are millions of braces. So then you get into that kind of common use thing that always gets thrown around. Well, braces are in such common use, and in such common use in terms of commerce from all of the different gun manufacturers, right? So many gun manufacturers have accepted, hey, this is just a normal thing. We put it on our gun, we sell it to the consumer. Because that is such a normal thing, I feel like the ATF would have a much harder time approaching it in the same way that they did bump stocks. I mean, they're going to get hit with a ton of lawsuits over this. FPC is going to be filing plenty of suits, GOA, probably the NRA. I mean, they're going to get slapped with 1 million lawsuits over this. And they should. And the gun industry should apply their entire amount of clout and legal pressure onto the ATF if they possibly can. So I just wanted to mention that. I mean, we support SB Tactical. We know that they haven't done anything wrong. They provided a product to the community that is a very essential product and that helps a lot of people who have difficulty shooting pistols. It has always been that type of intended purpose. So,
well, that's the thing too, is like intent. So what is intent? So, I mean, I buy a handgun, all right? Say it's back in the 90s. You buy an AR pistol back in the 90s, okay, before braces were ever a thing, okay? And some people did have difficulty, shooting those particular types of firearms and things like that, so the braces were developed to assist in that matter. And having a brace that is designed as a brace on a handgun does not change the intended structure or the intended use of that firearm, out of the box. I mean, there were people back in the 90s that were, shouldering AR pistols all the time, getting fussed at by ROs back then, on public ranges and stuff. The same crap happens today. Would you have your paperwork on that, sonny boy? That's not a pistol. That's the whole argument. It's like, well, where does it become not a pistol? In the way you use it? So, I mean, you mean to tell me if I put my 1911 on my shoulder up here or on my elbow, does it change what the gun is? No, it doesn't. I mean, that's the arbitrary nature of this entire discussion is, how do you determine, okay, well, these things should be illegal because it makes this into an NFA item. Well, how? The braces are not designed nor intended to be a stock. So if an item is in question put on a handgun that is not designed or intended to be a stock, but it's used in a light that may be a little bit different than the intended purpose or the original purpose, does that change the configuration? I mean, that's where the deeper argument is. And I think that's where all this stuff really stems from in the ATF's light, and it's just a couple of people with varying opinions from, gun owners, okay, out there, the vast majority of gun owners, and they just don't like something.
So on that, I'd like to add...
I mean, they just don't like it, so therefore they're going to do everything in their power to get rid of it.
Of course.
I mean, so
I'd like to shout out real quick. So a letter was recently wrote, a bunch of written. It was writ.
Oh, you're such uncultured rednecks.
I am uncultured. But basically, a letter was just sent out from some concerned senators. Among them, I'd like to give a shout out to Ted Cruz, who is doing excellent work. He is such a good guy, and he is really putting in great work and fighting real hard for the people of Texas, and y'all should be proud of Cruz. He's a good guy. Many senators signed on to this letter. Among them, Kelly Loeffler here in Georgia, as well as David Perdue, which are up for election in the runoffs. Make sure you go out and vote. I know I say that all the time, but make sure you get out and vote in the Senate runoff here in Georgia. Super important. But we just wanted to mention that in this letter, they wrote this letter to the ATF, and they had a lot of concern over this brace issue and the arbitrary nature of how the ATF can just go, well, one day we want to do it this way, the next day we want to do it this way. So in this letter, essentially, and we'll provide a link below, you can go read the letter yourself, they lay out their concern for the lack of standards for, sort of a, what they can be beholden to in that regard of, how they view these things. So they really essentially demanding them to come up with a standard and stick to it.
They really need congressional oversight with it because, I mean, they can just arbitrarily change the rules without going through the actual lawful process of changing the laws. Like, they literally need to change aspects of the NFA. They literally need to change aspects of the GCA, the Gun Control Act, in order to really, truly implement these new rules and regulations that they just want to push down the pipeline without any sort of oversight whatsoever. They think that's why people call the ATF a rogue agency, because they do get away with a lot of things. I mean, just like bump stocks, okay? When Trump issued his executive order about bump stocks, okay, to say, hey, I want the DOJ and the ATF to look at bump stocks, and I want them out of here. Okay, well, what happened? The ATF issued, an opinion basically and a standard that they were in fact machine guns. And that's an interesting fact too, is because there is a case, I'll have to link to it below because I don't have the information right in front of me, a case that I read about recently where a bump stock was involved in a crime, but it was deemed not to have been a machine gun, so there was an extra charge that was not able to be pursued against this individual, okay? So that is a case, from what I understand, is trickling its way up to the Supreme Court, potentially, because if they determine that a bump stock is not a machine gun, okay, in that case, well, then why are bump stocks illegal? Because a bump stock is not a machine gun, I mean, as we've said in the past.
I mean, not only are they a rogue agency, they're an agency of thugs.
Yep.
Like they are trying to scare people into towing the line of a political ideology and not of one of reality and law, right?
Yep.
So the thing is you can't bypass the checks and balances of our government, right? You can't just say, well, we don't like this, so we're just going to say, if you do this, we're going to arrest you and charge you. Well, all right, you can get arrested. All right, you can get charged. But at the end of the day, though, look at all the situations, right, where the ATF actually arrests someone or charges someone with something, and then it winds up going to court and getting thrown out. I'm not saying be complacent on that and just assume that that's always going to happen. But remember that video that Chad and I made where we talked about the guy in California that the ATF busted doing the,
He was illegally manufacturing firearms, without the proper license.
Right.
Yeah.
But that rose into concern about what a firearm actually is. And because they knew that they probably didn't have a leg to stand on in terms of winning that court case, they actually threw the court case out and gave the guy a bit of a deal. And they said, hey, we'll throw this out. You quit doing what you're doing, and we'll just go the other way and pretend this never happened.
Wipe our hands.
Anytime an agency like the ATF says that, they know that they can't, because obviously if there was some way that they could, put you away for life and be able to put a little bragging rights thing up on their Instagram page of how they put away the evil guy making guns in California, they would do it.
Yep.
But the fact that they didn't, there's a lot of things that I feel like they know they don't have the legal clout to stand on, but they rattle sabers. Like, they're an agency that's real big on saber rattling. And yeah, anyone can get a crooked judge to sign off on a warrant and go do something to some guy in some really anti-gun jurisdiction where they can get the ability to do that and go in and arrest them and charge them and all of that and get them in the tank and rile them up and threaten them and basically coerce them into a confession or into a deal, right? That's how they work. They bully people around, and that's the intended purpose, is through coercion and through bullying and through saber rattling.
Like Michael Flynn. The phrase of the day, children, people, ladies and gentlemen, is legal precedence.
Yeah.
I mean, the ATF saw the possibility of a legal precedence being basically created, okay, that could endanger some of the control they have over the firearms industry.
Correct.
I mean,
that's a very easy way to put it. Yes.
So mainly in regards to what is a firearm in regards to the receivers on an AR, okay? So that could have led into numerous topics like 80% receivers and things like that. What is the firearm? What needs to transfer as a firearm? What is a machine gun? I mean, it could have had a lot of interesting facets to that case.
And it goes right back to the bump stock thing you talked about, because it's the same type of thing. That probably got thrown out because they knew that a bump stock is not a machine gun. It's an accessory. It's just a freaking accessory. It's a piece of plastic or a piece of metal. It's not a gun.
Like, no matter what anybody says, what the ATF says, or these rogue agents or whoever, okay, no matter what they say, a bump stock is not a machine gun. They might say it on paper, but physically it is not a machine gun. One press of the trigger, one round fired. Okay, just because it shoots fast doesn't make it a machine gun. Just because Jerry Michalik shoots fast doesn't make him a machine gun. I mean, it's asinine to think that way, but this is what we have to deal with. We have to deal with asinine people at a somewhat antiquated agency, okay, just throwing out these arbitrary letters, laws, regulations.
At the whim of anti-gun politicians.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's just, what really chaps me with this whole situation is that personal feelings and personal opinions make their way into a professional environment where they have, there's no reason for those two things to intertwine. If you are in a professional environment, you follow the letter of the rules and regulations of your company, the rules and regulations of the law of the United States of America. If you're working for a government agency, whatever the case is.
How about following the damn Constitution?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So why is that a problem? Why do your personal feelings have to come into play when you're dealing with the American public and the firearm owning public? It shouldn't be the case, but unfortunately it is. And yeah, so just like anything else, just like with the bump stock deal, all right, how many bump stocks got turned in across the country?
Yeah.
I mean, mass noncompliance, just like prohibition. We always talk about prohibition when it comes up, when this kind of stuff comes up into topic or into talking points. But prohibition. Okay, prohibition failed because of mass noncompliance. All right, gun bans and things like that these days will likely fail because of mass noncompliance.
And look at marijuana. It's the same type of thing.
I mean, look at all the cities and the states and stuff that are caving in now and legalizing marijuana, in a recreational sense. I mean, it should happen. I mean, there's politicians out there that would argue otherwise, even on the Republican side.
Right.
Which, some things I have to side a little bit more with the moderates and the liberals on, and like marijuana is one of them. Like,
it's a dumb reason to lock someone up.
Well, it's a dumb reason It's a dumb reason for a lot of things.
Well, why somebody can drink 2 quarts of beer and get on the road and go get in a DUI, but someone who consumes marijuana is all of a sudden the devil? I mean, I'm just not buying it. And
that's another discussion.
That's a whole other discussion. We're not going to go there. But I will say this: that to answer your question earlier, Chad, that you posed there, is like why do they do this? Right?
Yeah.
The reason is it's all about control. It's about control and power and influence, and it's ultimately about chasing that almighty dollar, okay? Really what all of this comes down to, you look at the dollar bill and you can see a pyramid on the dollar bill, all right? That should tell you everything you need to know. The bottom line is, this is a giant pyramid, right? And they want to be on the top, controlling everybody on the bottom, and dare I say, the average American people, they want to be nothing more than the foundation and mortar that holds it all together. That's all they want. It's all about power, and it's all about consolidating influence and power and being a mover and a shaker. And it's like when people get into these environments and they get that title on the door and they get their little plaque on their desk. It's got their name and title on it. And they've got, a piece of paper on the wall that says, you're this. Yeah, it's like people get into this strange type of scenario where they feel like they can do no wrong and they feel like they are superior to you, right? And that's a very scary situation. It comes down to perceived superiority, and I feel like these people feel that they've been bestowed some sacred ability to keep the poor peons down in the country. And I think that ultimately they view the average American as a peasant. And I think that they don't give 2 craps about your Second Amendment rights. They don't care about what's constitutionally valid. All they care about is what little tiny bit of chip off the block they can take without us doing anything to them in return. And I think ultimately that's what this is all about. They know that this is a tiny stepping stone. And as much as I hate to admit this, there's probably a lot of random fuds out there that could give 2 craps less about a Q honey badger.
Yep.
There's fuds that could give 2 craps less about a Ruger 1022 with a brace on it. A Ruger 1022 pistol with a brace on it.
What do you need that for?
Yeah, why do you need that? Right, so there's plenty of people that are doing the ATF's bidding for them because they are so blinded by their own personal views that they can't see the forest for the trees in terms of our rights and the constitutionality of it.
They're blinded by ignorance, and it's definitely a problem. We've been talking about it for years, this just divisiveness in the gun community itself. I mean, like, I don't really mind anybody if they just want to have a couple of hunting guns, some duck guns or whatever. That's fine, but don't moan and groan about somebody who wants to own an AR pistol or a 1022 with a brace on it or whatever the case is. I mean, and then ask, what do you need that for? Well, I'm not a hunter, so what do you need that for? I mean, we don't need to eat our own. The way that the ATF and the way that lawmakers chip away at gun owners' rights is kind of like the old frog in water analogy. Okay, I'm sure you guys have heard this before. You put a frog in boiling water, what's he going to do? He's going to jump out. All right, you throw an assault weapons ban at the American people. What are they going to do? They're all going to rally together and go to the state capitals and stuff and try to stop it, right? Okay, so you throw a frog in cold water and you turn the heat on and he slowly boils. Well, by the time he really thinks about what's going on and realizes what's going on, it's too late at that point. So that's kind of the analogy that is really, it really fits this situation quite well. The other thing I was going to mention, it's sort of in relation to this, it has to do with the ATF.
Sure.
If I'm not mistaken, okay, there was a company an importer, who filed a Form 6, which is a form to import a particular firearm, okay, or firearms. They were presented a denial from the ATF, and from what I understand, a letter was drafted up from their law agency or their attorney and everything, and it's basically talking about how pistols, okay, like rifle caliber pistols and stuff being imported, didn't meet some new criteria that the ATF just dreamt of. It's basically, the gist of it is, under the ATF's new interpretation of handgun definition, millions of AR-15 style pistols could be considered too large or too heavy to fall within the ATF's new interpretation, making them unregistered NFA weapons. And subjecting manufacturers and gun owners to criminal prosecution. Given the private nature of ATF's classification rulings and the subjective nature of the analysis, it is extremely difficult to know for sure whether specific firearms fall within this new interpretation. So this is another thing that's kind of ongoing right now is this ATF scare on the interpretation of what makes a handgun, okay? Like, when you're bringing in AK pistols, AR pistols, or whatever, manufacturers here are making large format handguns, okay, is what they're kind of commonly called. How do you say, okay, well, that's too heavy, or that takes a rifle cartridge, so that's not a handgun? Well, who gets to make that determination? If the current specifications of a given firearm fall within the current law, okay, as laid out by the NFA, laid out by the GCA, okay, then that should be the end of it. There should be no interpretation,
right?
Okay, of the laws that are on the books. Interpretations are just that. They're opinions. Okay, you're interpreting the law, but what the law is what the law is.
Right.
I mean, it's black and white. There's no gray area with it.
And the issue becomes as well that, okay, well, one could just say, well, if the law needs to change, well, then there's a process for changing laws.
Well, yeah.
Right? We have a system of checks and balances, and laws have a certain system of checks and balances they go through to be passed. Okay, so if what they're saying, all right, well, you can't reinterpret something. It either is or it isn't, and that's the issue. That's why people say the ATF is a rogue agency, because they just say, well, we don't like that now. But that's not how it works. You can't just say we don't like that now. So anyway,
I got
an
idea. So I'm going to go and apply for a job at the ATF, and I'm going to write a letter, and it's going to say, you know what? It's my opinion and my determination that the NFA is null and void. Woo! All right. So if it's on paper, it's good, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the scary part about it. When you give these bureaucrats the ability to just swipe a pen,
man,
that's the issue. And what Trump did with bump stocks is very concerning, because all it's going to take is the next anti-gun president administration that we get. They're going to sign an executive order saying, that Geisley trigger that's really nice, you can shoot it fast, we don't like it. Oh, you know what? AR-15s, we don't like them. We're just gonna tell the ATF to just do this.
Yeah, they're gonna dictate like spring weights in your trigger, in your fire control groups and stuff. Like you're gonna have to have like a New York trigger in your Glock, like a 12-pound trigger, in order for it to be considered safe and available for private ownership. Yes. I mean, dude, how much are they gonna chip away at?
The problem is they're opening up Pandora's box, and Trump opened up the floodgates for that. And that's one thing about the Trump administration that I definitely disagree with, was the handling of bump stocks. I think it was a very terrible precedent.
Well, it's not like he had good advice from the NRA on that matter.
Well, I digress. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. One could argue, well, was he just giving bad intel? Was he giving bad advice? And I think the answer to that question is quite clear at this point.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to maybe give him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, but that's for the history books, I suppose. But all we can do is look at what's in front of us, and we have to make sure that we're staying alert and making sure we're on the same page with all this stuff. And we wanted to bring awareness to this issue to make sure you guys knew it was going on. And we support Q. We support SB Tactical. We support all the OEM manufacturers that are using SB Tactical's products and putting them out there in the hands of people every single day. We support those people. We support the idea of having brace pistols. We support, obviously, having AR and AK pistols. We own quite a few ourselves. We love them. They're very useful. And definitely, we don't want to see them go away, just like many of you don't.
Well, don't forget, too, not just the companies, but the people that work for them as well, because when stuff like this comes down the pipeline, I mean, it could mean the closure of certain companies, and it could be people out of jobs. And that is not something that we want to happen, at all. We don't want to see anybody out of work over some, bullcrap, just somebody's opinion, and then thousands of people lose their jobs over it.
Well, and remember too, guys, that without crappy cops to enforce these horrible laws, all of these ideas are nothing more than bad opinions. So that's the thing. We have to look at this from a holistic point of view. So definitely some soul searching that has to be done on a lot of people's parts with this sort of stuff. And, it's like, how far are you willing to go? And before the people ultimately push back. And I think it'll be in a way that will make the French Revolution look like a cakewalk. No pun intended, Marie Antoinette.
Another discussion for another day.
Yeah, we won't go there, but I think we've got them outnumbered, guys. Anyway, have a great day. Guys, we appreciate you watching today's Gun Gripe. Make sure that you tune in. We've got plenty on the way, lots more content on the way. I definitely want to take a moment to thank all of our supporters on Patreon, as well as folks who are buying t-shirts over on Ballistic Ink. Pick yourself up a snazzy tee. Also, we got some great man cans for sale. Knife pre-sales we're doing all the time. Many more videos on the way. Thank you very much for the support. We'll see you soon.
See you guys.